T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit fire.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit fire.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. We got a special weekend coming up, man. You know what makes this weekend so special? This is going to be the final weekend without football. Thank you, God. We have finally made it to this point, man. One thing that I hate the most about football is how long the damn off season is, man. We got the longest off season in all the sports as football fans, man. But training camp is in full swing. Next week, the NFL Hall of Fame game is going to be played Thursday night, August 1st on ESPN, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure that you guys tune in to check it out. And on this afternoon's episode, we got to talk about the biggest headline going around right now. Tua finally got paid. The Dolphins have locked up Tua long term. I got to give you guys my thoughts on it. Dak Prescott's future, man. Him and Jerry Jones have been trading cryptic statements. We don't know if this is going to be his final year as the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. Should the Cowboys bring back Dak Prescott or should they just let him walk? I made a bold prediction a few nights ago when I gave you guys my NFL record predictions. I picked the Chargers to win the AFC West, and you guys went absolutely crazy on me, man. And I got to justify myself why I believe the Chargers are going to dethrone the Chiefs for the AFC West title. I also got a lot of backlash for picking Alabama to win that SEC this year, so I also got to explain myself with that one as well. The Baltimore Ravens signed another aging veteran, and if you know anything about the Baltimore Ravens is that they always find a way to get the most out of these guys who we presume to be out of their prime. And I want to talk about their newest addition, there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State this year, and particularly Ryan Day. And Paul Feinbaum recently made a comment where he believes that if Michigan goes 4 straight over Ohio State this year, Ryan Day, regardless of what happens after, he has to get the boots. I got to push back against that. And I got early thoughts on Colorado, Nebraska, and I got to expose the truth why EA Sports continues to make trash football games. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're listening on YouTube. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you're listening on X, leave a like, retweet the live, follow if you're new. If you have a question that you would like answered when we do our mailbag episode on the weekends, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT___. Shout out to my guy Kate Roan with the $5 donation. He says, woot woot, JT Sports Live on Friday, and football is almost back. Powerful, JT Sports Live. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the donation, my guy, Kate Roan. Before we dive into it all, here's a quick word from our sponsor. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. Aura shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. All right, man. The first thing that we have to talk about, Tua finally got paid. Him and the Dolphins have come to terms on a 4-year deal worth $212.4 million. 167.1 of that is going to be fully guaranteed. And this is the largest 4-year deal in NFL history. Tua is now the 3rd highest paid quarterback in the game behind Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. Listen, nobody should really be tripping off the amount that Tua got paid, because we already know how it goes at this point. Whenever there's a quarterback in line to get a new deal, they're always going to end up becoming one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid. So I don't have a problem with the salary. My question with Tua is that, are we going to see him perform better in big games? Regardless of how you Miami Dolphins fans believe I feel about Tua, I don't hate the dude. I don't think he's garbage. I don't think he's overrated. And I think he's a damn good quarterback. But I'm not one of those folks who see him as a quarterback that can get you to a Super Bowl. You see, when are we going to start seeing Tua Tagovailoa actually show up in these big-time games? Because we saw the Dolphins put 70 on the Denver Broncos last year, but got blowed out by the Buffalo Bills the following week. And every time Tua went head up against Josh Allen always looked like the more superior, more talented quarterback. With Tua now, with him getting this much money, you're never going to be able to field a complete team around him. So is he going to be able to overcome the limitations that he's going to have to deal with, possibly never having a good offensive line? You're getting all this money. That's going to take away from what the Dolphins are going to be able to do in terms of bringing in free agents to improve the interior of that offensive line, you're pretty much saying that, hey, Tua's our guy and we can win with whatever we put around him. He's 32-19 as a starting quarterback in the league. That's one of the better win-loss records in the National Football League. And overall, Tua is a top 10 quarterback, probably top 8 in my opinion. He's really accurate, does a really good job of taking care of the football, but in big moments in big games, he always tends to come up short more times than he does end up coming up clutch. Once you get into the playoffs and you have to play a guy like Patrick Mahomes, you have to be on your best game in the fourth quarter when palms get sweaty, chest get tight. Can Tua deliver a game-winning drive to get the Dolphins far in the postseason? Because that's what it's going to take. At this point, we already know Tua's a good quarterback, but is he a championship caliber QB? Because right now, many Dolphins fans feel Tua's the best quarterback they've had since Dan Marino, which I would agree with that statement. But just because he's the best QB you've had in recent memory doesn't guarantee that he's going to be the dude to lead you to the promised land, because you could find yourself 4 or 5 years down the road in the same kind of situation that the Dallas Cowboys are in with Dak Prescott. It's hard to move on from guys such as Dak and Tua that win you games, they get you to the playoffs, they give you high-end quarterback play throughout the regular season, but once you get into the playoffs, it's a different animal, and those guys play their worst football. You need Tua to flip that switch and play good enough to take down a Lamar, a Joe Burrow, or a Mahomes in the postseason. And that's why I've always been such a big critic of Tua, because when he was coming out of Alabama, I thought this dude was going to be a top 5 quarterback in the game. And he hasn't played like that in most of these big games that the Miami Dolphins play in. Now, I'm not going to put it all on Tua and say that it's all his fault for why the Dolphins have a lot of shortcomings in these primetime matchups, but he definitely needs to step up his level of play with the money that he's about to start getting paid over the next couple of years with this new contract extension. Like I said, he's a high-end quarterback, and it's difficult to move on from somebody like Tua Tagovailoa because you definitely can do a lot worse. It's definitely hard to find top 10 level quarterback play in today's NFL, but you also have to be willing to roll the dice and bank on somebody else being the dude. And I'm wondering if Tua over these next couple of years is going to cement himself as one of those quarterbacks who can either get you over the hump in the postseason, or when the playoffs rolls around, you always know that he's going to be a no-show. So the Miami Dolphins have made Tua the 3rd highest paid quarterback in the NFL. I know that there's going to be a lot of split opinions in the comment section, but I don't have any problem with this signing. I'm just expecting more out of Tua. I believe that if he would have played in that wild card matchup when they had to start Skylar Thompson, they would have won that game against the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen was imploding. He was turning the football over. He didn't really have that good of a game. The only reason I believe the Dolphins lost was because they didn't have good quarterback play in that game. And we haven't seen too much of Tua in the postseason. Last year was his first ever playoff game. So over these next couple of years, I'm going to be heavily critical when it comes to evaluating Tua's playoff performances, because if I'm going to make you the 3rd highest paid quarterback in the game, I need to start seeing you deliver in the postseason. And if not, I don't care how good you are during the regular season. The postseason is where legends are made. That's when we see the elite quarterbacks separate themselves from the average quarterbacks. Which one is Tua? Is he a Dak Prescott, or is he an actual top 5 elite quarterback in this game? Shout out to everybody in the comment section. Shout out to my guy, K. Hen. He says, both up. My guy, Kate Roan, says, damn, I haven't heard Tua got paid. He's a solid QB, but I don't think a franchise guy like Lamar or Patty Mahomes. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in on X, YouTube. Hit that like button. Follow, subscribe if you're new. While we're on the topic of quarterbacks, we got to talk about another quarterback who is looking to get paid, but things are starting to get really murky in terms of his future. And the quarterback I'm talking about is Dak Prescott. I thought that Dallas was going to extend Dak Prescott before training camp, but training camp has since started and a deal has yet to materialize. Jerry Jones has made some cryptic comments when it comes to Dak Prescott. He said that he's looking for more in the postseason. Meanwhile, you see Dak Prescott, on the other hand, he's coming out and saying that he doesn't know if he's going to finish his career as a Dallas Cowboy, despite how much he would love to remain in Dallas. These contract talks are really tough for the Dallas Cowboys because, for one, you got to pay Michael Parsons, and you currently have to find a way to get CeeDee Lamb locked up long term. He wants to become the highest paid receiver in the game, and he definitely has a right to that kind of money. But the biggest question for Dallas is that if you can't win it all this year, is it really worth investing $60 million a year to Dak Prescott? Because if I'm Jerry Jones, I understand where you're coming from. You see, Dak Prescott has had so much leverage over the Dallas Cowboys over the last couple of years, is that you want to see more once you get to the playoffs. The Cowboys have a good enough team to win it all nearly every single year. It's just that once the postseason rolls around, this team just completely falls apart. And Dak Prescott has been a big reason for the Cowboys' playoff roles. He only has 2 playoff wins throughout his career. One of those came in his second season, early on in his tenure with the Cowboys. And the second one came when they destroyed old man Tom Brady, his final game ever with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But outside of those games, Dak Prescott hasn't really looked that good come playoff time. And if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm not about to give you $60 million a year, make you the highest paid quarterback in league history, just for you to completely shit the bed every time the biggest moments occur. The Dallas Cowboys fan base is pretty split on this. There's a good majority of you guys who don't want Dak Prescott back. You want to run it back with somebody else, but there's a good majority of the fan base who believes in Dak Prescott, and they believe that if he's good enough to perform at an MVP level throughout the regular season, he's more than capable of doing that in the postseason. And I really do believe that Dak Prescott is good enough to win the Super Bowl. Now, when is that ever going to come to fruition? I really don't know. But to win the Super Bowl, all you really have to do is string along 3 or 4 good games, and boom, you're there hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And I do believe that Dak Prescott is one of the best quarterbacks in the game. I consider him to be an elite quarterback. It's just that once we get to the playoffs, the Dak Prescott that we see in the postseason is not the same one that we see putting up these great statistics in the regular season. And I understand that Dallas did win a few games when Dak was hurt with Cooper Rush, but let's not act like the Cowboys can just win with anybody at QB. Okay, it's really hard to find you a Dak Prescott in today's NFL. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I would take Dak Prescott in a heartbeat. And maybe if Dak plays for another team, he ends up winning a Super Bowl elsewhere, maybe him and Dallas just aren't meant to ever win a championship together. It's like that sometimes. If the Dallas Cowboys are planning on moving on from Dak Prescott, if things don't work out this year, I definitely believe that they have every good reason to do so. Because why are you going to give up so much money to a dude who just can't get it done when it matters the most? But are you going to have a good backup plan for if you're willing to let Dak walk away in free agency? Because I don't see Trey Lance being the answer. And I know there's a lot of Trey Lance fans still out there who believe that he was done wrong and dirty by Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, but listen, people hold Kyle Shanahan in a really high regard. They believe that whoever you stick in his system at quarterback is able to produce at a high level, but Trey Lance was the exception. He had an injury that held him back, but he just wasn't that good. He got traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a mid-round pick, and we are going to see a lot of him during this preseason, but I don't see any juice with Trey Lance. And I don't think it's worth rolling the dice, giving him 1 year to prove himself when you have the opportunity to draft Shedeur Sanders in next year's draft. Dion already said that they have no problem pulling a Eli Manning to get Shedeur to the team that he really wants to play for. If Dallas needs a quarterback around next year's NFL draft and they're in the range to trade up for Shedeur, I don't see how they don't make it happen. Jerry Jones is a great marketer. Not only is he a really savvy businessman, but he also is somebody who knows how to sell tickets. He knows how to generate a lot of attention. And what better way to do that by drafting probably the most polarizing, the most popular quarterback prospect in NFL history and putting him on the most popular team, the biggest brand in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody would be buying Shedeur Sanders jerseys. Everybody would be talking about the Cowboys. And you will have some new optimism instilled in your organization because you will have a new fresh face underneath center and Shedeur, who the fan base is already going to be familiar with because of his last name. I would love to see Shedeur Sanders replace Dak Prescott. And I really believe that in the back of Jerry's mind, that's what his plan is. And it's not going to be that hard for Shedeur to become a Cowboy if he wants to become one. There are already a lot of teams who are going to be turned off to the idea of drafting him just because of the Hollywood vibe that he brings, the character concerns. If you're Dallas, though, knowing the kind of organization and team that you are, you love everything that comes with Shedeur Sanders. And he definitely will give you the opportunity to have a better shot at winning it all over the next couple of years than you running it back and paying Dak Prescott $60 million a year, because you will have more money to spend on other positions rather than investing majority of that on just one guy who has proven time in and time out he just doesn't perform that good in the playoffs. Jerry Jones, to me, if he's hesitant to re-sign Dak Prescott, I understand where he's coming from. It's not worth it giving you $60 million a year just to show up in the regular season and play like dog shit in the playoffs. Football is a team sport. You don't have to lecture me about that if you're a Cowboys fan, but let's not act like the quarterback position isn't the most important when it comes to determining the wins and the losses, especially once you get into the different season that is playoff time. You have to have a different mentality. And Dak Prescott, when we saw him against the 49ers in the playoffs a few years back, he struggled in that game. If they would have had Lamar or Joe Burrow, they would have went way further than what they did that year. What about last year when they got embarrassed by Jordan Love and the Packers? At home, by the way, too. That loss wasn't all on Dak Prescott, but he definitely was part of why they did lose in the fashion that they did. If you plan on firing Mike McCarthy after this year, you might as well reset at quarterback also, because you can only go through so many head coaches before you start looking at your quarterback and saying, you know what, maybe you may be the problem. And I love Dak Prescott. Great leader, great locker room guy, always says the right thing. He handles being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys really well. But just because you're a great locker room guy, that's not why I'm paying you $60 million a year. I'm paying you because I believe you can get me over the hump. And I don't see it with Dak Prescott in Dallas. I really don't. I get why you Cowboy fans love him so much, but you've been with him so long and you're getting the same results every single year. When you continue to get the same outcome, you know what you have to do? You got to change your situation. Go ahead, restart at quarterback, have more cap space to allocate to other positions, and roll the dice on somebody else. But if your plan to succeed Dak Prescott is Trey Lance, you don't really have one. And if you're going to start over with the new head coach, you might as well give him a new quarterback as well. So if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm standing firm on these. Listen, I'm not about to give you an extension right now until you show me you're capable of looking like an elite quarterback come playoff time. It's no point to give you elite QB money if you only look like one for the first 3 months of the season, and then come January, the most important stretch of the NFL year, you're a no-show. You don't deserve that kind of bag. You don't. I don't care if you're good enough. Good enough doesn't win a championship. You have to be that guy. And in the NFC, with the lack of elite quarterbacks that are in this conference, you would have thought that by now, Dak would have already have gotten the Cowboys to a conference championship. A lot of you guys came at me really hard when I picked the Los Angeles Chargers to win the AFC West in my NFL predictions, and I gotta explain myself because a lot of you guys are heavily sleeping on the Chargers. Listen, you don't have to scream at me that this team is not that talented. I understand that, but I do have to continue to lecture you guys every offseason how you can't judge a team just strictly off talent. There were teams that made it to the playoffs last year that didn't look that talented on paper, that overachieved because they had great coaching. Prime example, the Los Angeles Rams. Most of us thought the Rams were going to be no better than a 7-8 win team, but they went to the playoffs despite the amount of young rookies that they had to play because of how good Sean McVay is. When you have an elite head coach, he can elevate the talent on his roster. Mike Tomlin has continued to produce winning seasons despite all the odds, playing in the toughest division in the NFL with no damn quarterback. He still finds a way to win. Why? Because he knows how to elevate the players on his team. Jim Harbaugh can do the same. Y'all seem to forget how dominant Jim Harbaugh was his first couple of years coaching in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers. Before he got there, they were irrelevant. People forgot about the 49ers. Then all of a sudden, they're in 3 straight conference championship games, and they appeared in the Super Bowl. Y'all are severely underestimating the power of great coaching. I'm not overrating the Chargers. Y'all are underrating the Chargers because you continue to disregard how important it is to have great coaching. The Chargers have underachieved the last couple of years. Why? Not because they haven't had talent, because the coaching has been awful. Now you have a coach in Jim Harbaugh who knows how to win. There's never been a single place that Jim Harbaugh has coached at where he hasn't won. Name me one team that Jim Harbaugh has coached when his tenure ended up in a failure. Nowhere. This Chargers team doesn't need to be talented to win this division. Why? Because they have the perfect team in place to run the Jim Harbaugh style brand of football, which is being tough up front, having elite trench play on the offensive line and the defensive line, having outstanding rushing attack, something that the Chargers haven't had the last couple of years. You're finally going to have, and you got an elite quarterback too. With those things in place, the Chargers definitely have a good chance to win the AFC West. Kansas City, their offensive line is not as good as what the Chargers is. And a big reason why Kansas City has dominated this division for so many years is because the coaching has always been terrible. The other 3 teams in this division have swapped coaches nearly every 2-3 years. With Jim Harbaugh, this is a coach who's good enough to stop Kansas City from their domination over this division. He knows how to win. He knows what it takes to build a winner. The dude just won a national championship at his alma mater. He has assembled a really good coaching staff. What has killed the Chargers the last couple of years, and the main reason why they continue to underachieve, is because of poor coaching. With the elite coaching that they're going to have, with Greg Roman calling the plays on offense, they're going to have a top 5 rushing attack. And I'm not making this out to be a prediction. I'm telling you that this is actually going to happen. Everywhere that Greg Roman has been, he's produced elite rushing attacks. And it doesn't matter if you have Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins at running back. Any RB that gets plugged into Greg Roman's system automatically produces at a high level just because of how innovative he is with his blocking schemes and how he likes to call his running plays. When you got an elite offensive line, it's going to help that rushing attack perform at a high level. And with you now having the ability to run the football, you're going to be balanced, and you're not going to have to overly rely on Justin Herbert to win you games. Well, what about the lack of talent that they have at receiver? Y'all don't know about Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is extremely overlooked. He was a great route runner coming out of Georgia, great hands, creates tons of separation, and he's a really good blocker in the run game as well. He automatically is the Chargers wide receiver 1 right now. Greg Roman doesn't run an offense that's heavily dependent on having elite wide receiver play. And if you think about the history of Jim Harbaugh and everywhere he's been, he's never had outstanding wide receiving play when he's won. He's won with guys like Vernon Davis and Michael Crabtree being his 2 best options in the passing game before. You don't need to have elite wide receivers to win in today's NFL. I don't know why you guys continue to say, oh, we need elite receivers. We need to get better wideouts when Kansas City just won the damn Super Bowl with randoms at wideout, bro. If Kansas City can win a Super Bowl with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson at wideout, the Chargers can win this division with the guys they have right now. What about how improved this defense is going to be? You had a guy in Brandon Staley who was a defensive-minded coach, but yet the worst area of this team was always the defense. With Jim Harbaugh bringing Jesse Minter along with him, who was his defensive coordinator at Michigan, this is going to be a vastly improved defense. The Chargers are not going to recognize the defense that they are about to see on the field this year. This was a defense that last year under Brandon Staley, they were one of the worst teams against the pass. They were 29th in pass yards per game allowed. They were 28th in yards per game allowed. And they were 23rd in points per game allowed as well. The last 2 years that Jesse Minter was the defensive coordinator at Michigan, they were number 1 last year in points per game, and they were number 1 in yards per game allowed as well. 2022, the year prior to last, they were 6th in points per game allowed and 5th in yards per game allowed. And don't give me that whole nonsense of, well, he was a college coach, JT. You don't know how that's going to translate to the NFL. Newsflash, people, Jesse Minter has NFL experience also. They got him from the Ravens staff. It's like the Ravens and Jim Harbaugh swapped coaches. Jim Harbaugh gave John Harbaugh Mike McDonald, and the Ravens gave Jim Harbaugh Jesse Minter. And when you have an NFL background, that's going to make from the transition going from college back to the NFL a little bit more easier. And he also runs an NFL-style defense. The Chargers' defense is not as bad as what you guys think. They still have a really good defensive line. You got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa when he's healthy. Those guys are studs. Despite how old they're getting and their durability concerns, those guys are still going to be a huge factor this year on that defense. You signed Bud Dupree, who's always been a pretty solid rotational guy, and occasionally he can pop off for 7-8 sacks from time to time. You got a really improved linebacker unit. You drafted Junior Colson out of Michigan, who to me was the best linebacker coming out of this draft class. You got Denzel Perryman. The last couple of years, you guys have been starting Kenneth Murray at linebacker. He's been one of the worst in the NFL at his position. Your secondary is pretty solid. You got Asante Samuel Jr. and Derwin James is still one of the better safeties in the league, even though his play is starting to regress a little bit. And what gives me so much confidence that the Chargers can win this division over Kansas City is not only do you have Jim Harbaugh, a coach who has won everywhere he's been, but you have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL this year. You only play 4 teams who can potentially make it to the postseason this year. And your 2 toughest non-division games, you play at home this year against the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals in back-to-back weeks. Kansas City, they got a way more difficult schedule. They got way more concerns up front than what the Chargers do. Jim Harbaugh is not Brandon Staley. He's not Antonio Pierce. He's not like any other head coach that's been hired in this division to stop Kansas City from winning it. He is the best head coach that the Chiefs dynasty has faced since this Mahomes-Andy Reid partnership. Kansas City Chiefs fans are about to get a heavy dose reality when you're actually going up against a well-coached team. I get tired of hearing Chiefs and Raiders fans brag about how Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders hung 40 on them on Thursday night. Yeah, I'm willing to bet $1,000 the Raiders don't hang 40 on the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. You guys keep telling me I'm overrating the Chargers when I'm telling you that you're overlooking the importance and the impact of elite coaching. This is not going to be the same Chargers team that you've seen underachieve so many years. You got an elite quarterback, an elite head coach, an elite offensive line. You're going to have an elite defense when you're good up front. You got a good quarterback. It doesn't matter who else you have at wide receiver. Jim Harbaugh's method of winning has been proven to work everywhere he's been, and it's going to work this season when the Chargers go 12-5 and they win the AFC West this year. You guys keep living in the past when football is a year-to-year sport. If we just judge teams based off what they did in the past, we will have the same playoffs every year and we will get the same Super Bowl every single season. It's a new year with the new regime, with the new head coach that knows how to win. He has the resume that he has shown he knows how to win. And the Chargers, right out the gate, year 1 under Jim Harbaugh, I am still really high on them, and I'm taking them to win the AFC West. I don't give a damn how many Super Bowls the Chiefs have won. I don't care if Kansas City has dominated this division for so many years. It's going to end this year. They're not as good up front as what the Chargers are, and they haven't gone up against a coach inside this division as good as what Jim Harbaugh is. You can say I'm overrating the Chargers all you want to. I'm going to keep telling you that you're underrating the Chargers, and you need to go reevaluate the importance of what it means to be a well-coached football team. We see plenty of teams underachieve every single year, not because of talent, but because they get let down by lackluster coaching. The biggest problem with the Chargers has been their inability to hire the right coach. They finally have the guy in Jim Harbaugh. It may seem like a hot take to pick the Chargers to win the AFC West over Kansas City, but I'm really confident that is going to happen. I caused a lot of chaos. Start that over. I caused a lot of chaos a couple of nights ago when I did my SEC predictions and I had Alabama winning the conference for the second straight year in a row, going 11-1. And of course, you had the people coming at me who were disagreeing with my prediction of Alabama winning the SEC again, saying that, man, they just lost Nick Saban and they're replacing him with this West Coast guy named Kalen DeBoer. You guys continue to underrate Kalen DeBoer and disrespect this man. This was the best replacement that Alabama could have hired to replace the greatest head coach in college football history. Everywhere Kalen DeBoer has been, he's won. He was winning national championships at his alma mater when he was coaching NAIA football. He was successful at Fresno State. When he got to Washington in 2 years, he took that program from the pits of about to be irrelevant under Jimmy Lake when he damn near ran the Huskies football program into the ground and saved it, led them to a national championship, something that Chris Peterson was never able to do in the span of 2 years, and didn't lose more than 3 games, including beating Oregon and Dan Lanning twice. If he can win at Washington in that short amount of time, imagine what he can do at Alabama with them still having a top 5 roster. Not everybody transferred out of Alabama when Nick Saban retired. Y'all keep thinking about Caleb Downs, Isaiah Bond, and a few other players that left, but there is still a lot of talent from Nick Saban's regime that still is on that roster. Malachi Moore is one of the best defensive backs in America. Jalen Milroe is one of the best quarterbacks returning going into this season. A lot of people view him as a legitimate Heisman contender. Do you not know how disgusting Jalen Milroe is going to be this year under Kalen DeBoer? What did Washington's offense do so well last year? Michael Penix and those receivers were fantastic at generating big plays in the vertical passing game. Jalen Milroe throws the deep ball more accurately than he throws short and intermediate passes. Tommy Rees was not a good offensive coordinator. He was mid at best. He kind of somewhat held back Jalen Milroe. Kalen DeBoer knows offense. He's going to find way more innovative ways to utilize Jalen Milroe's unique skill set. You're going to see way more design quarterback runs, and you're going to see Jalen Milroe become a more polished passer in 2024 than what he was last year. It's also going to help that you don't have Seth McLaughlin fucking up the snaps anymore. In Alabama this season, what people are overlooking is how good their offensive line is going to be. What Alabama's biggest struggle has been on offense the last 3 years has been their inconsistent offensive line play. They should have a top 10 offensive line going into this season. They do lose a lot on defense, but you've recruited so well on that side of the ball, and you do have a really defensive coordinator who Kalen DeBoer hired, that defense shouldn't have too big of a drop-off. Alabama is still one of the top 5 most talented teams in college football. And you pair that up with the head coach that was able to win a Pac-12 title, lead Washington to the national championship in the span of 2 years, where they had a roster that was outside of the top 10, top 15 from a talent standpoint. Imagine what Kalen DeBoer can do with more resources, with a more talented squad. He already, to me, is the second best head coach in college football, right behind Kirby Smart. Another reason why I love Alabama to win the SEC this year is that they got a very favorable schedule. Their biggest games are on the road against Wisconsin. That's a W. You got to host Georgia at home. You know that Alabama is Kirby's kryptonite. Every time he sees Alabama, Georgia always struggles to win those games. On the road against Tennessee and Rocky Top, that's winnable. Missouri at home, that's winnable. LSU on the road in Death Valley, I love Kalen DeBoer over Brian Kelly. And then you got to go on the road to play Oklahoma. How many potential losses do you see on Alabama's schedule this year? I can't see any more than 1 or 2 at best. Kalen DeBoer is a prodigy as a head coach. I don't think enough of you Southern people understand just how good Kalen DeBoer is. But the reason why I've been talking about this dude so much, every move that he's made, even recruiting, you guys know that I don't talk too much about recruiting, but I have talked about it a lot in terms of covering Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, because the big thing that people were saying about him when Alabama first hired him was that, wow, he ain't from the South. He's a West Coast guy. He's coming down to the South. He don't really have any pipelines down here. He's not going to be able to recruit well in Alabama. Alabama has the second or third best recruiting class in the nation. What excuse are you going to use against Kalen DeBoer next? What I'm about to say It's what a lot of Alabama fans feel, but they're afraid to say it because they feel like it's too early. But I really believe that Kalen DeBoer is going to be the second coming of Nick Saban. I'm not tripping when I say that. I'm not joking. I really believe it. This brother has won everywhere he's been. If you can win 3 national championships at the NAIA level, you can win anywhere. If you can turn Washington around in a span of 2 years and lose no more than 3 games, you can win anywhere. It doesn't matter if you are coaching in the Pac-12 or the Sun Belt. If you're a good coach, you're a good coach. You know how to win everywhere you go. And the fact that Kalen DeBoer can win without having to spend $20 million and NIL money on the roster to do so shows you that he's a great strategist. He's a great game manager coach where he knows how to make in-game adjustments and he knows how to tailor his scheme and his philosophy based off the talent that he has in place. They got a great running back room. They're stacked at receivers. Alabama is stacked all across the board at every position. You keep on sleeping on Kalen DeBoer, and he's going to continue to prove you wrong like how he already has done in recruiting. It doesn't matter if it's not National Signing Day yet. Most of these guys are going to remain committed because, for one, it's Alabama, and for two, they know how good of a coach Kalen DeBoer is. I trust Kalen DeBoer more than I trust Steve Sarkisian, Brian Kelly, Lane Kiffin, or any other head coach in the SEC other than Kirby Smart, because he has won with less when most of these coaches continue to say, we need more of this, we need more talent, we aren't getting enough funding or resources to get the blue chip guys that we need to compete. You didn't hear Kalen DeBoer making excuses at Washington, did you? His first 2 years there, didn't lose anything more than 3 games. That is astonishing. And him coming to Alabama and Tuscaloosa was the best move that Alabama could have made to replace the GOAT. Alabama's going to win the SEC this year for the second consecutive year in a row. I don't see why it's that big of a hot take. They still are the second, third most talented team in this conference, depending on who you want to put over them. If you want to say Georgia and Texas are more talented, cool, but they still are good enough to win this thing, and they're good enough to win the national championship this year. And with Jalen Milroe at the helm at quarterback under Kalen DeBoer's tutelage, y'all better be really afraid if you got to play Alabama this year, because the Tide are going to continue to roll under Kalen DeBoer. I don't think the Alabama dynasty is going to be going anywhere anytime soon as long as Kalen DeBoer remains in Tuscaloosa. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, man. Shout out to my guy, M. Sparks. He says the Chargers or Chiefs will win that division, but the Chargers are not overcoming KC this season, perhaps next year. My guy Kate Rohn says he brought the Huskies down and whooped the Longhorns 2 years in a row. My guy N. Spark says Phil showing improvement at training camp, better coaching, and sitting behind Russ will prove to be beneficial. I can't agree with the statement that he's getting better coaching in Pittsburgh, man. Mike Tomlin's a good coach, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing when it comes to evaluating the quarterback position. So I don't know if I would consider Justin Fields him getting better coaching with Arthur Smith, somebody who struggled to utilize the best players that he had on his squad in Atlanta. But we will see. I do love Justin Fields, and I believe that the Steelers are going to have any shot of keeping Mike Tomlin's winning season streak alive, it's going to be behind Justin Fields at center. Before we move on, if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find every episode, including this one, on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Go ahead, give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. Follow us on Instagram at JTSports_, on X at JTSports__. I'm going to be doing a mailbag episode this weekend. If you have a question that you would like to be featured in it, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram, JTSports_, and on X at JTSports__. Before we move on, I got to get me a quick sip of water. So next up, we got to talk about the Baltimore Ravens, man. If you follow the Baltimore Ravens franchise over the next couple of years, you know that they do something better than any other team in the NFL. They will take these aging players who we perceive to be out of their prime, they'll sign them, and they'll put them in the fountain of youth, and then they'll have those guys playing their best football near the tail end of their career. They just signed former Chicago Bears All-Pro safety Eddie Jackson. And a lot of people are kind of glossing over this move, but I'm not. Anytime the Ravens sign an older player, they always end up playing at a really high level. Jadeveon Clowney last year had the best year of his pro career, man. The year before that, they had Justin Houston, who was still producing at a really high level despite him being on the older side of 30. Remember the year they went to the Super Bowl and won it against Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh's brother? The majority of that team was old as hell. You had Torrey Smith, Anquan Bolden, aging old Ray Lewis, and Ed Reed. The Ravens are one of those franchises that when they get these older players, they just put them in the fountain of youth or in that time chamber, and they just find a way to squeeze the most juice out of those dudes before they end up retiring. I don't know how the hell they do it. Maybe they have a Lazarus pit in there that we don't know about, and they push those guys in, and 30 minutes later, they come out playing like their younger self. Eddie Jackson is going to be a really underrated move that nobody's going to talk about until he ends up going off for the Baltimore Ravens this year. Even when they had OBJ last year, it wasn't like he did anything or he didn't do anything. When he was on the field and the Ravens went to him, he made a good amount of plays. The problem with OBJ was that he just couldn't stay healthy. Every time the Ravens signed one of these aging veterans that seem like they're past their prime, their glory days are behind them, they always find a way to have these fools playing at a high level, man. They're one of the best teams in the NFL at being able to pull this off, and they do it every single time. Eddie Jackson, I don't think he's going to be an all-pro this year, but he definitely is going to be a really good player in that Ravens secondary along with Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton. The Ravens always find a way to do this, man. Every year when they get an older player, they always end up going off under them. I thought that we would never see Jadeveon Clowney ever live up to his potential. It took him going to the Baltimore Ravens, being, damn near a decade into the league, to finally reach his ceiling. Don't overlook the Ravens signing Eddie Jackson, man. They're just one of those franchises that anytime they sign an older player, it just seems like they know how to make it click and they know how to get the best out of them. Next up, we're going to switch back to college football. There's no coach in America that has more pressure on them than Ryan Day coming into this season, man. He's never had more than 2 losses in a year, but Ohio State fans are always at this guy's neck wanting him to get fired. And Paul Feinbaum a few days ago said that if Michigan wins 4 straight over Ohio State, Ryan Day has to get fired no matter what happens. And I believe that nobody's even going to have to worry about having that conversation because Ryan Day isn't going to lose 4 straight to Michigan. There's no way Ohio State should lose again to Michigan this year. They are just way more talented than Michigan all across the board. The way that the Wolverines have beaten Ohio State, being tough up front with a dominant rushing attack, it's the same way Ohio State should be able to turn the tables in this rivalry. Nobody in college football, including Michigan, is going to be able to stop this 2-headed monster of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. I don't know how the NCAA allowed this to happen, Ohio State getting their hands on 2 of the best running backs in college football, but it happened. They also have the best coaching staff in college football. You got not only Jim Knowles, one of the best defensive coordinators in the sport, but somehow you were able to get Chip Kelly to take a demotion saying, nah, I don't want to be a head coach no more. I'd rather just become an offensive coordinator. It doesn't matter if UCLA's offenses haven't really been that explosive. The reasoning for that is because Chip Kelly hasn't recruited at a high level at UCLA. But despite that, UCLA's offenses were still really good. They've always been dominant when it came to running the football. He's produced some really good running backs. Zach Charbonnet had a fantastic tenure at UCLA under Chip Kelly, and he's in the NFL now in the Seattle Seahawks. With what Ohio State has at running back, Chip Kelly has a boatload of riches to end up producing one of college football's most dominant offenses that we should see this year. Chip Kelly, the problem with him is that he doesn't like to recruit. He doesn't have to recruit at Ohio State. All he has to do is call plays, and you pretty much are giving this dude the lottery when it comes to the talent pool that he has to call plays with. This dude has a loaded wide receiving core. He's going to have a decent quarterback in Will Howard. Some people question if Will Howard is good enough to lead Ohio State to the Natty. He is. They don't need to rely on Will Howard as much as what they have relied on their quarterbacks in the past because of how dominant the rushing attack is going to be. Like, seriously, who is going to be able to stop Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins on the ground? Their offensive line has been a concern the last 3 years, but that's not going to be an issue this season because you reunite Chip Kelly with his former offensive line coach. In Ohio State, they have way too many resources. They recruit way too good to continue to have struggles on the offensive line. When you have the amount of resources they do and they recruit at such a high level, you're only going to have a weakness at a certain position for so long until you eventually figure it out. If Michigan ends up dropping 4 straight, or they end up having their 4th straight win over Ohio State, I would never, ever talk about Ryan Day in a positive light ever again because there is no excuse for him losing to Michigan. Those Michigan teams that Ohio State ran into the last 2 years were all-time great. And the biggest kryptonite for Ryan Day is gone, which is Jim Harbaugh. I'm not expecting for Michigan to remain the powerhouse in the Big Ten that they were under Jim Harbaugh, under Sharon Moore. I get that the dude was able to go undefeated in the games that he had to fill in as the interim head coach for Harbaugh when he was serving out that brief suspension during the season. But it's a lot different when you still have Jim Harbaugh having the final say in the game plan and running the program than it is when you're running the program all by yourself with nobody advising you how to do so and nobody overseeing it over you. This is a new Michigan where they're replacing a lot of production that they lost to the NFL. They don't recruit nearly as good as Ohio State. And Michigan fans keep on throwing out that, well, we've won a national championship and we've dominated Ohio State all these years despite not being able to out-recruit them. So why will that end this season? Because talent in college football kind of means everything. It's not the end-all, be-all, but normally when you recruit as good as what Ohio State does, you end up being in the national championship picture every single season. And what has held back Ohio State from getting to the national championship has been their inability to beat Michigan and them coming up short against Georgia. But outside of that, Ohio State has ran through everybody that there is to play. I cannot imagine Ohio State losing 4 straight to Michigan this year. This is a Michigan team where we don't even know how good their quarterback play is going to be. And you can sell me the dream about how they have a lot of guys who didn't get a lot of action, but when they did come in last year, they were highly productive. No, they got too many new faces this year for them to continue to dominate over Ohio State. I agree with Pon Farbaum. If they lose to Michigan again, Ryan Day definitely has to get fired. Unless they win a national championship, which definitely could happen. But with what Ohio State has in place going into this season, I know I get seen as a Michigan hater because I'm always doubting them, but they really shouldn't win against Ohio State this year, man. Ohio State really should win it all this year. If they don't win the national championship, hell, I believe that could be a fireable offense. But when the bar for having a unsuccessful season is 2 losses, it's hard for me to say you deserve to get fired, no matter if he loses 4 straight against Michigan. I'm a Miami Hurricane fan. I would love to have Ryan Day as our head coach down there in South Beach. You can say that he inherited an already tailor-made program from Urban Meyer, but Ohio State was not recruiting under Urban Meyer at the level that they are under Ryan Day. He has taken an already great program and made it even better. It's just that we haven't seen the on-the-field success yet. But there still is a learning curve that comes with being a head coach. And Ryan Day has still been learning on the job. Imagine you getting your first opportunity to be a head coach, but it's at a school that has the tradition and pageantry that Ohio State has. The bar is set extremely high, and you don't get a lot of opportunities to make too many mistakes and to have to learn, but Ryan Day has done a good job of making adjustments on the fly. He has a good handle on the new age of college football with the NIL and transfer portal being such a big thing. He got his alumni or donor base to donate $20 million to their NIL backing. You don't get that kind of funding if your organization doesn't believe in you. So I believe in Ohio State. I can't see Michigan winning 4 straight over them. I really can't. But this is the same guy who also said I couldn't see Michigan winning 3 straight over them. Jim Harbaugh is gone. Sharon Moore has to show me that he can beat Ryan Day, that he can run Michigan, and they can be as dominant as what they were under him as they were under Harbaugh, and I just don't see that happening. They have way too many questions. Ohio State is stacked at every position. They're going to have so many guys getting drafted high in next year's draft. If the Buckeyes lose this year to Michigan, I really will be lost for words because it shouldn't happen. The only game Ohio State should lose is probably to Oregon. And even then, they have a better team at Oregon. Not by a huge margin, but by a pretty comfortable margin. So I can't see Michigan winning 4 straight over Ohio State. So I don't really think we have to entertain the idea of what if Michigan wins 4 straight over them, what happens to Ryan Day, because I don't see it happening. I want to give you guys my early thoughts on Colorado versus Nebraska. This game has been on my mind for all this offseason because this is going to be a really interesting matchup between these two teams this year, because last year Colorado dominated this game 36-14, but the main reason why Colorado won was because Nebraska's offense couldn't do anything. I love Jeff Sims. I'm always going to support my Duval brethren, but he was really hard to watch. With Dylan Raiola now at quarterback, it changes everything for Nebraska in this matchup. And right now, Vegas has them as a 6.5 favorite going into this game, with this game being played a few weeks from now, the second week of the college football season. And for Dylan Raiola, this is going to be a huge big test for him, because anytime you play Colorado, everybody's going to be watching because they're going to be tuned in to watch Deion Sanders. So, of course, they're going to be watching you in the process. And for him to be a true freshman and the game of this magnitude is going to be a really tough early task early in his career. He's going to be playing at home, which is going to make things a little bit easier. But there is going to be a sense of pressure on him where you have all these expectations placed upon you because Nebraska has been down for so many years. And you think about how good this defense was last year. This was a top 20, top 15 defense last year. There were games when this defense carried the offense in a sense. And if Dylan Raiola can give Nebraska at least average to above average quarterback play this year, not only could they win this game and embarrass Colorado, but they potentially could go on to maybe have an 8, potentially 9-win season, which would be a huge achievement for Matt Rule in year 2. However, though, Colorado is not the same team that Nebraska saw last year. And Nebraska fans feel really confident in their ability to beat Colorado this year. And a lot of other people do too. But what people are underrating about Colorado is how improved this team is going into their second season under Deion Sanders. You see, last year when Deion got the Boulder, they just got a bunch of guys from the transfer portal, tried to throw shit on the wall and make it work. And they didn't really have too much success outside of their 3-0 start. Well, now you improve the offensive line. You improve the defensive line. You have a loaded group of wide receivers and a really good running back in Dallin Hayden. And we already know how good of a quarterback Shedeur Sanders is. Matt Rule gave Shedeur a lot of praise for how good he is. When you have this much talent offensively, Nebraska's defense, they are going to get some stops in this game, but Nebraska's offense, you're going to need to see a good amount out of Dylan Raiola. We are about to find out just how good he is right out the gate this early into his career. Dylan Raiola really is going to be the biggest factor in determining if Nebraska is going to win or lose this game. Colorado defensively, they should be a lot better than what they were last year. They have a new defensive coordinator who comes from Lou Anarumo's staff. Lou Anarumo, for those of you guys who don't know, he's one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL for the Cincinnati Bengals. And when you get a DC that comes from his coaching tree, you can expect that this is going to be a unit this year that's going to be more disciplined. You're not going to have as many blown coverage assignments as what you saw last year. They're going to be better when it comes to wrapping up and tackling. Colorado defensively should be more improved, but their defense is not going to be anywhere as good as what Nebraska's is. And if you can come away with a couple of turnovers, if you're Nebraska, and you can capitalize early on them, that could put this game in your favor. You have the home field advantage. I don't believe that Colorado has ever played in as hostile as an environment as what they're going to play in this Nebraska game. And I know that they did play Oregon last year on the road, but this is a rivalry game, which is going to have a different flair to it. And the intensity is just going to be different. Nebraska fans don't like Colorado, and Colorado doesn't like Nebraska. But it's also going to be some more added tension because of Deion Sanders. And anytime a team plays Deion, you know that they're always going to give it their best. Dylan Raiola, how good is he going to be? Is he going to be the guy who can resurrect Nebraska football from the pits of damn near irrelevancy? This is the game that's going to be one of those tests to us figuring out the answer to that big question. Because Nebraska definitely is a way better team year 2 under Matt Rule than what we saw year 1 last year. They had some concerns at receiver and that quarterback. You got a really decent wide receiver room. Isaiah Nayer, who was a transfer from Texas, before he went to Texas, he was the best wide receiver in the Mountain West. He was averaging damn near 20 yards per reception. The dude was electric. And then he went to Texas, dealt with a couple of injuries that held him back. But Nebraska, with how good they are at receiver, you got a decent running back. You're going to have a really experienced offensive line. The offensive line in itself should prove to be a significant advantage for Nebraska offensively, because Colorado, despite the improvement that they've made on the defensive line, I still don't think that they're as good as what they need to be when you're going up against a team from the Big Ten as tough as what Nebraska is. But Shedeur Sanders, though, I trust Shedeur. He's the best quarterback in college football. If this ends up being a one-possession game late and he has the ball in his hands and he needs to go win it for Colorado, I trust him to get it done. No matter if it's on the road or in the parking lot or even in the rainforest, every time the ball is in two hands, he always seems to deliver. This is a game that I believe is going to be decided by less than 3 points. Even if Nebraska wins, there's no way they're going to cover that 6.5 point spread. Right now, I would take Colorado to win, though. I don't think that their defense is going to be all that great in this game. Nebraska should have success running it on this Colorado front. But with them having a true freshman quarterback, it does give Colorado's defense the opportunity to have chances at coming away with some turnovers that Dylan Raiola may give them. Now, just because Dylan Raiola is a true freshman doesn't mean that this dude is going to be terrible. The last time Nebraska started a true freshman quarterback in Adrian Martinez, he turned out to be pretty good. Dylan Raiola, this could be a game where we see him be up and down. He could have some really good moments where he shows glimpses of how good he's going to be in the future, but he also is going to have some moments where you're going to see just how inexperienced he is. And for him to be playing in a game of this magnitude so early into his career, this is only going to be like the second game of his collegiate career, and it's going to be against Colorado, Deion Sanders, against a rival, prime time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on NBC. Everybody's going to be watching. There is a lot of pressure on Dylan Raiola going into this game. And I know you Nebraska fans don't want to go 0-2 to Colorado. But if I had to give you a prediction right now, I do believe that Deion will improve the 2-0 over Matt Rule in this program. Colorado, to me, is going to win the Big 12. They're the most talented team in the Big 12, and they're being heavily underestimated because too many people are focused on what they did last year and overlooking the improvements that they've made going into this season. But this is going to be a really good game. I'm so excited to watch it. This is one of those games that I've had circled on the calendar all this offseason, and I cannot wait for college football to be back, man, because the last time these two teams played, it was pretty fun to watch until Colorado started running away with it. But I'm really fascinated in seeing how Dylan Raiola performs in this game. We know Colorado has playmakers, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders. You're going to have even more with LaJohntay Western, who you got in the transfer portal, who is a wide receiver transfer from FAU, who I had the honor of watching in person. They got a really good transfer on defense from Arizona State, who is a top 100 rated player from the portal. There are a lot of talented guys that Deion has playing on this year's Colorado squad in areas that Colorado was lacking at last year. And Deion told y'all last season that they were only a few dogs away from being where they want to be. I cannot wait for this Colorado-Nebraska game to be played this year. This is one of the games that I am the most excited to watch this college football season. And the last thing I want to talk about before we get up on out of here is, do you guys wonder why Madden has been so trash the last couple of years? Because I remember the glory days of Madden, which were Madden 11 to Madden 17, the gameplay was pretty good, especially in Madden 25, NCAA 14. To me, those were the two football games that had the best gameplay, not named All-Pro 2K5. But the reasoning for why football games made by EA suck now, including the new College Football 25 and the new Madden that's coming out, is because they continue to use a game engine that was never intended to be used to be developing sports games. And it never makes any sense why they use this new engine, but they used to use something called the Ignite engine. And what the Ignite engine was, it was an engine that was tailor-made for sports games to help replicate, realistic player animations or how players would respond to certain situations in real life. They had more realistic running styles. The way that they behaved was more realistic. But then they went to this Frostbite engine, which was originally intended for first-person shooters, and they are trying to make it work with these football games when it's not intended to be a game engine made for football games. You see, the Ignite engine was why NCAA 14 and Madden 25 are held in such a high regard when it comes to gameplay, because they had great physics in those games. Now, I get that the gameplay wasn't always perfect, but I could play those games for hours and never get tired of them. Meanwhile, I play Madden in the new College Football 25, and I get ready to turn that game off within the span of 45 minutes turning it on, because the way these players just move with these wonky animations is just really unbearable to watch. With some of these catching animations, like they're glitching through guys, the offensive line never really blocks properly, and people put a lot of blame on EA not hiring the proper developers for why these games suck. But I don't really think that the development team is a huge reason for why Madden continues to be bad. I think that these developers are being put in an impossible situation where you're asking them to make a football game with a game engine that isn't intended to be used for football games. How does this make any sense? You designed the Frostbite engine to be used for Battlefield and first-person RPG games, not to be used for sports. So why are you using them for sports? And the difference between the Frostbite engine and the Ignite engine is that from a graphic standpoint, you get more realistic crowds. The game looks more realistic than what it looked under the Ignite engine, but the Ignite engine gave you better, more smoother gameplay. And we keep wondering why they can never get the offensive line right, why the game always plays arcadey. I get that it's a football video game, so it's never going to be ideally similar to what we see in real life. But it just felt like, to me, NCAA 14 and Madden 25 and even Madden 13 just play so much better than the new Maddens that we have coming out. And why EA continues to put out these trash football games is because they continue to use a game engine that was never intended to be used for football games. Now, recently, last year in 2023, they came out and said that whoever develops their titles has the ability to use any other sports engine as they please. Don't know if we can trust them that they're telling the truth on that. But if they are, why haven't they developed a different game engine tailored towards these football games? Why not bring back the Ignite engine? They say that there's always a reasoning for why companies do certain things. But for EA, it seems like anytime something's working, they got to find a way to fuck it up and make it worse and then charge you more money for it. There was never a reason to go from the Ignite engine to the Frostbite engine. If anything, you should have built on the Ignite engine, which was already pretty good, gave you a really good infrastructure, but instead, you're trying to code a game that was never intended to be made on this kind of engine. And that's why these developers have such a hard time programming real football logic into these players, because they're trying to do it with so many limitations that gets placed on them because of them using a bad game engine that isn't intended for it. Why does EA Sports continue to develop Madden games and football games on this game engine? The only explanation I can give you is EA Sports, people. I spent 2-3 hours today trying to figure out what was the reasoning for them switching from Ignite to Frostbite, and the only thing I could see is that they just wanted all their games to be made with the same engine. Maybe to cut cost, maybe it was a lot easier if you just use one engine to develop every game. They thought that it would be easier on the developers, but I did see a lot of developers saying that coding games for Frostbite is a lot harder than what it was coding games for the Ignite engine. And back then, people said that making games for the Ignite engine wasn't the easiest. But it's more easier to build a game off an engine that's tailored towards a certain genre. That's like, I am a sports YouTuber, right? I'm never going to go into talking about politics because that isn't my area of expertise. So therefore, if I start talking about politics, I'm not going to give you as good as takes as I would talking politics as I would football because I better understand football. That's where I have more knowledge at. That's like me being a great reader, but terrible in math. So if I know that I'm great in reading, I wouldn't go to college and get a degree for something that's pertaining to mathematics like engineering or biochemistry. That's what EA's doing. They're trying to build a game using an engine that wasn't made to be making these kinds of games. And it blows the hell out of me because I was talking to my homeboy about this a few nights ago, and he gave me a good idea to make this segment because he was like, why don't you play Madden? Because people always tell me that I need to add B-roll for my footage. And the reason why I don't use B-roll is, for one, it gets copyrighted. And two, it takes too much time to implement into these live streams. But some people suggest that I have Madden or the new college football game being played in the background as B-roll footage. And I strongly push back against it because I hate playing Madden. I haven't played Madden in the last couple of years. I've only played college football 25 because I wanted to see how good was it going to be. And I miss playing a college football game, and it actually has exceeded my expectations. But I'm not about to put an unrealistic game as some background footage for you guys to watch when it doesn't simulate real football. EA games are far from simulation. They call themselves simulation football games, but really, they're arcade football games at best. The reason why you keep on playing these trash football games is because EA keeps building them with a trash gaming engine that they were never intended to be built on. This is it for this area, or this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Shout out to my guy, M Sparks. Shout out to my guy, Kate Roan. He says, I didn't know any of this about Madden and everything. Damn, JT, you're a computer genius on the download. I don't want to say I'm a computer genius. I'm just going to say, with me being a lot younger, I'm more tech savvy than most. I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Football season is just around the corner. Training camp has started to heat up. We're going to have the Pats on next week. We got our first preseason game, Hall of Fame game. We got the Chicago Bears taking on the Houston Texans. You definitely want to make sure that if you haven't already, that you are subscribed to the channel. You have post notifications turned on because we're going to be having a lot of content coming out more frequently than we already do, because football season, to me, is already back starting next week. We're going to have some more guests on that I believe you guys are going to enjoy. And I'm just so happy that this off season is over. It's such a dread having to go through 5, 6, 7 months with no football. They had the UFL, but I didn't really watch it that much. But, I'm just happy that football season is here, and I appreciate all you guys for being subscribed to the channel. Please do me a favor, listen to the podcast. We're available in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever you consume on YouTube, you can also listen to in podcast format. If you need an excuse to go through your girl's phone to see if she's being loyal to you, just say, hey, baby, there's a guy named JT Sports that I really love, and I would love to give him another 5-star review. I just need your phone to do it. You take her cell phone, and you got a chance to be a little sneaky. You just go through her text messages real quick, see what she's up to, and continue to give us a 5-star review. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode when we do our mailbag episode tomorrow, follow us on Twitter or X at JT__, and on Instagram at JT__. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys